Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. If you've wanted to try out watercolors, or maybe you've tried them in the past and they just haven't quite worked for you, or maybe you are a teacher looking for a fun project to teach your students, then this is the video for you. Over 20 years that I've been teaching art, this is probably one of my favorite watercolor classes because it is super easy to learn, anyone can do it, and you end up with a really great product. Whether you are 7 or 77, everyone has fun with this one. So here are the tools that you're going to need. The first one is watercolor paints. Boom, this is not sponsored, but this is the brand that I recommend. So the Prang Watercolors is relatively inexpensive, but is a pretty good product to test drive. After you decide you like watercolors, then I highly recommend that you upgrade your paints to a nicer quality. You're going to notice the difference. But for just starting off, this is a good set. For all of these things, I'll leave a link in the description box below to where I purchased them on Amazon if you'd like to check it out. Next is paper. This again is a nice brand of watercolor paper for beginning artists. This is what I do all my testing on and play around with, and I use in my classes as well. So this is a Canson watercolor brand. I would recommend sticking with either a Canson or Strathmore as the two brands that I recommend. There are some watercolor papers that claim to be watercolor papers but are not watercolor papers, and they will just turn into a mushy mess. So these two brands are the ones that I recommend for my students. Next are paintbrushes. This, I feel like a makeup guru. This right here is what a paintbrush should look like. I don't even know if I have the abominations that claim to be paintbrushes but are not, but you probably have seen them. They're like the plastic handles with the plastic bristles. You get them in the little craft kits. Throw them away. So you want, with watercolor, you want a paintbrush that's going to hold water. So a nice soft bristle is going to work. This one here is considered a round because it is a circular, while as this one would be considered a flat because, haha, look, it's flat. For this project, you're just going to need a round. This one is a size 6. You're going to also need something to wipe up paint, so I just use some good old paper towels. And then, of course, water, which I'm currently out of, but I'll get some more. Those are all the supplies you need to start painting a watercolor painting. For this project, there's one extra thing that you could use, and that is a stencil. These are some of the ones that I used in a class I did recently. So this is a crab shape, and this one's a seahorse shape. What I did to make my own stencil was to draw this shape onto cardstock and then cut it out. But before you think, whoa, she's so good at cutting, I cheated. I used my Silhouette cutting machine. But if you don't have one, a little bit of patience and scissors, you'll get one as well. There's lots of different ways to get your image. You can draw it out, you can take a photograph and trace around it, but just remember not to go super detailed, just a simple shape. You could do this with something as simple as a circle or a square, but it's kind of fun if you get a shape that's recognizable as something. I have my watercolor paper and the stencil of my choice, which I'm going to use this Seahorse right here. I'll leave a link in the description box below over to my DeviantArt account, and I will have these two shapes that you can print off and then cut out for yourself, if that helps you at all. One other tool I forgot to mention is a pencil, and you're going to want to use it very lightly. You're just wanting to see the shape, but not like, don't grind your pencil in there. So I'm going to just take and trace around here. And you can also use the opposite of the stencil, which is the inside cutout piece. So maybe you just cut out this paper and you have just the inside. You can use that as well. Whatever works best for you. Some of my students have done whales, some have done horses, cats, dogs, really any shape you want. I just find having some stencils makes it a little bit easier because our focus on this project is to watercolor, not so much to learn how to draw something. So having a pre-cut out stencil is really handy. So I went ahead and drew all the way around my stencil. And I can pick that up. Someone else can now use the stencil. And you can see I have a nice pencil shape. Watercolor is just that, coloring with water. So the color is only going to go where the water goes. So I'm taking my brush, I filled it up with a whole bunch of water, and I'm just going to wet down an area inside my shape. Now because water is clear and sometimes it's hard to see where I have placed the water, just tilt your head to one side or the other. You can see the light reflecting in your water. It's kind of shiny. The more water you have, the faster your watercolor paints are going to spread. The less water you have, the slower they're going to spread. So I'm just going to do just the head here. So if you look carefully, you can see exactly where the water is. It's where it's shiny, and where it is not shiny, like over here, it just looks like normal paper. Now I'm going to take my watercolors and I'm going to wake them up. So watercolors come in two forms. There's tube paints like this, and there are cake forms, which are like this. The fun thing about tube watercolors is when they dry out, they just turn into cakes. So I need to decide now what color I want to begin with my Seahorse. And now this is the fun part, because you can have it be any color that you want. This is your art. It doesn't have to be realistic, but I would recommend to start with your lightest tones first. So maybe you want to have several different colors in your Seahorse. I'm going to start with something that's a little lighter. So I'm going to start here with my yellow. So I'm going to put some water in there and wake my paint up. I'm going to wake my paint up. I can't talk, but I can paint. You can see it right there on my brush. Now the more I stir and mix this, the thicker the concentration of my paint is going to be. If you want a lighter yellow, you're going to use more water on your brush in ratio to the paint. If I want a brighter, more vibrant color of yellow, then I'm going to kind of scrub this around and get that pigment really mixed in there well. Now while my paper is still wet, I'm just going to start tapping in some of my colors. And you'll see it kind of begins to spread. Let me zoom in a little bit closer. You'll see that as my paint touches this water, it'll start to spread. See how it's spreading right up through here? It's going where the water is. Now down here there was a little bit more water, where up here it was a little bit less, so you can see it's not spreading as much. As the paint spreads, you can see it's more diluted in the water, so it becomes a lighter tone. So here it's much more of a vibrant color, where here where it's spread, you can see it gets lighter and lighter. I don't have to worry about my paint getting into this paper because it's dry. Unless I use gravity and it kind of drips, it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to stay right here. But I'm going to add a little bit more wet paint over here and add a new color. For this one, I'm going to use my red. So I'm going to tap in my red, and you'll see that it likes to spread a lot. I find different colors and different brands of paint spread differently, so not all paint is exactly the same. You have to kind of play around with it to get to know how your paint is going to react. So you'll see that my red is spreading up this way, and it's slowly beginning to mix in with my yellow. These are called gradients, when one color transforms into either a lighter tone or into a totally different color. So if I keep mixing these, I'm going to get a little bit of a peachy orange color. But what if I introduce another color to this? Again, I want to make sure that my paper stays nice and wet, so I might just drop a couple of drops right in there. Nice clean brush. This time I'm going to pick up this purple color right here. This is a beautiful dark color. And I'm going to touch this one right in here at this top. See how that's spreading? Now again, it's spreading all the way down here, but it's not going this way because this paper up here is dry and this paper down here is wet. At this point, you may be experiencing something that a lot of watercolorists experience, and that is a buckling or bowing of your paper. So right now you can't tell very much, but there's a little bit of a bow to my paper. And that's because as the water soaks into the paper, it expands the fibers of the paper and makes this a little bit bigger, but here is not expanding. So instead of expanding outward, it has to expand upward, therefore getting a bowing effect. Now there are a lot of different things that you can do to help avoid this or limit this, but I'm not going to go into that in this video because this already has enough in it. Now you can see I'm kind of dabbling some of this darker paint in here, just playing around with the colors. If I go too much, I'm going to find this all just to be all one kind of magenta-y purple. So you don't want to over mix it, but have fun kind of dabbling some different colors in there and playing around with that. Let's move on down our little seahorse over here. And you'll see I'm going to add some water, but you'll see that none of this paint is traveling down here because there's this dry bit. So as long as I don't meet those two dry bits together, I'm not going to have a problem with mixing colors. So if you're wanting to have one area, a single color, and not mix it, maybe I want this to be yellow here, but I don't want it to mix and play, just make sure you have a dry barrier or that this paint area up here is dried before you start mixing your colors. Because as soon as you bridge this gap between here and here, even the smallest bridge, you're going to begin to see that these watercolors are going to play with each other and they can travel. Sometimes they'll travel in here or sometimes they'll travel down in there. Now what happens if you get too much water? So you can see I'm kind of puddling up here at the top. I got so much water. So a thing you can do is take your paintbrush and your tissue and you're going to press out the excess water. Then you're going to touch with your slightly dry brush to anywhere that has a lot of water. And the water is going to go where there's less of it. And so you'll see it's picking up that water and I can then take and press it out and I picked up all that paint. So I can go through here and pick up the watercolor excess that I don't want. So that's one method. Another method is taking just a little corner of your paper towel and then just tapping it right on there, and you'll see that the paint just travels right up that paper towel. So let's keep going. I want to do some work on this fin here. So I'm letting these colors just kind of set for a little bit, kind of dry up a bit so they don't spread too much. And now I'm going to take some of this really nice blue, a nice vibrant blue. I'm just going to run this along the edge and you'll see it spreading so nicely. And because it spreads so nicely, it's not super dark. So if I want this to get darker, I'm going to let this set for a little bit, dry up just a bit, and then I'll go back over with that blue. But while I'm waiting, I'm going to pick up just a little bit of this yellow or red, not too much, and I'm going to just tap it down in here because I want to create a nice little purple gradient. So I'm kind of sweeping these around in here and getting these colors to play with each other just to see what they'll do. So I've got this part resting and I have this part here kind of resting, but I don't like that line, so I'm just going to take a damp brush and I'm just going to kind of sweep it around there because it was kind of drying with a harsh line there and I didn't really want that. And you might be asking me, well, how do you know what to paint and what not to paint? That is completely up to you. You might want to paint your entire seahorse with water first and then apply the color, or you might want to do little patches like this and then kind of bring them in together and have a little bit more control. So I'm going to do another fun technique down here where I'm going to add some water down to this tail. And then I'm going to go back to this really vibrant purple. I'm going to grab up a whole bunch. And this purple, as you can see, it's a very social color. It loves to play. So I'm going to get my corners just the way I want them. Another fun technique is to apply water in a different way. So here I have a misting bottle. This comes out as a really fine mist, not as a spray, so you want to test it out before so you know how intense the water is going to come out. But I'm just going to spritz some water right here and we're going to see what happens to my paint. Now you might think, why would you want to do that? It just ruined it. Well, not really, because that's the effect that I want. I want my paints to kind of go outside the lines a little bit. So by spraying it, it allows it to kind of naturally go in this really cool pattern because not all the paper has the same amount of water. So you can see this really well right in here where there's bits and pieces of the paper that didn't get wet, so the paint isn't going to get there. And even over here where it sprayed it, it splattered some of the paint over here. So it just gives it a kind of messy effect. Now this may be a technique that you really like, or it could be something that you're like, not a fan of. I want my paint to stay where it is. But I want to show you just so that you know, if you do this, this is going to happen, whether you do it intentionally or non-intentionally. So control your water or don't, and this is what's going to happen. All right, it's time to start getting my Seahorse to come together. So I've let my paint set for a little bit, and now I'm going to go ahead and add in my additional bits of water. And you'll see that the paint's not completely dry, so it's still going to play some, but there's some areas that I really wanted some vibrant colors. So that's why I let that rest in there. Again, this purple loves to play, so it's just going to travel right on up there. And I'm going to go ahead and add in the rest of the water for this tail. And then maybe add in a few more colors. So here I haven't done any green yet, so let's put some nice green in this tip of this tail. And maybe we'll put a little bit of green over here. All right, are you ready for another fun technique? Now, if you want to, you can tilt your paper around in different directions and have gravity help you mix your paints. So if you have still some wet areas on your paper, like you can see here and here, you can see that it really wants to travel that paint around. Now if I tilt it too severely, we're going to have a little teardrop, which is a fun technique. I can kind of help it a little bit by adding a little bit more water here and just get it started. And then we have a little drip. Maybe I want a little drip right here. Just going to give it a little outlet. Just like that. So you might want that technique. Again, you get to choose what you want to do. I want that drip technique here, but I don't want it here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this dry just a little bit because I have a lot of water down here. So again, I can take my paper towel and kind of just soak up any excess water that I don't want, because if I try to get this to drip while this is still drippy, I'm just going to have a very drippy mess. And then I'm going to go ahead and take my nice dark blue and I'm just going to get my puddle right in here. Whew, that's a nice, put a little bit of purple with that too. And I kind of get that, see how that's pooling right there? It's just primed to do a drip. And then we'll just let gravity take over there. Now see, it stopped here because this paper is still wet right here, so it's kind of trying to decide where it wants to go. And there we go, we have our little drips. So to even this off, I want one more drip over here. And I want to get a little bit more, I don't know if I want to do red. I'm going to do it, but it might not look, sometimes the red drips aren't always the best, if you know. It's can kind of be a little gruesome sometimes, but we'll test it out. It might turn a little pink for me if I add enough water. So I'm just going to pull this up here a little bit so it kind of blends in there a little bit, but I got my nice pool of water. Add a little bit more because I want more of a pink drip than a red drip. And just let it go on down. Ooh, see, it jumped into there. So that's kind of cool. It kind of combined because that was still a little wet there. Now if you don't like that, if that's just a little too red for you, I'm going to add a little bit of that purple, because remember how purple likes to play. And we'll let the purple kind of gradient in there a little bit. Again, watercolor is all about just playing with it, having fun with it, not being scared of a mess up. Even if this painting doesn't turn out and I end up, you know, recycling it, I learned so much on this painting. So here is my Seahorse. Now, this isn't done. This is just the first glazing. I want a lot more vibrant colors and intensities in this, but this could be done for you. This might be all you want to do, but I want to add a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this dry and then come back and begin to heighten my colors up a little bit more. There we go, a nice dry little Seahorse here. Now this is the part where I can go back in and begin adding any colors that I want to. Now I love color and I love adding all sorts of colors, so don't be afraid to make it completely rainbow. But also, don't be afraid to pick a color theme and stick with it. Now this technique is called wet on dry. That means the paint is wet, but the paper is dry. So do you notice a difference? This paint is not spreading like it did before. So this is a great technique to get that really fine details, to make paint stay exactly where you want it to go without it blending all over the place. I'm also going to go outside of my original stencil lines to create my piece being original, and that is perfectly fine. In fact, I encourage it for each of you to kind of take the stencil as a base, but don't be afraid to add stuff or add more flares however you want. I'm going to take that red and I'm just going to start tapping it in because I want it to blend with that blue. Remember, it's only going to go where the wet paint is, and because the undercoat paint is no longer wet, it's not going to travel there, but it will travel a little bit on that blue, creating a really fun gradient effect. I'm going to do the same technique but down here with the purple, and I'm going to use just my regular purple, but I'm going to really get a good intensity color with that. And just start sketching in kind of the patterns of the seahorse's kind of body. And there we go. So I have my lines on there, and it's not super wet because I was using a lot of just concentrated paint, and the paper itself is dry. So there's one more technique that I'm going to do, and this requires either two paintbrushes or a paintbrush and a pencil, but you'll see. So I'm going to use this one and this one. So I'm going to rinse out my paintbrush and then pick up the color that I want to use in a splatter effect. So my paintbrush is really wet, and I want to get that paint really up throughout the bristles. Now you also want to make sure that everything around you is okay if it gets messy. So make sure that you don't have any nice, paper that you don't want splatters, because we're doing a splatter effect. So again, this might be something that you think, yeah, I want to do this in my painting. It may be a technique that you're like, no, that's too crazy. So this is just for you to receive as you will. But you're going to take one paintbrush and then hold it really firmly, horizontally. And then you're going to take this paintbrush and you're just going to really quickly smack it on top of this paintbrush, which is going to cause a splatter effect. So here we go, ready? And go, wow. Now you see it's very light drops because I was talking too much and my paint water all dripped up there. But here that's really big, so there we go. That's some nice splatteries. So maybe I want to add some blue to that. So I'm going to jump in here to my blue. And you'll also find the harder you hit, the different ways your paint will fly. So again, this is just all about technique. I'm even going to grab some black because I have no black in this painting. I just think it'd be a nice contrast. I don't know. It may work, may not. Nice and thick, whole bunch of it on there. So there's that. Now, the last one I'm going to do is very lightly, I'm going to mist this. And can you guess what it's going to do? All right, I'll see if you guys can guess it, but I'm not going to mist it super close. I'm going to mist it far away, so it'll kind of be a very smooth transition. And we'll just see what happens here. All right, maybe in some areas I'll mist a little bit more. Like right there, I'm kind of liking that. And then I'm going to turn this around. Now you'll notice I lost a lot of detail in my tail. I also stuck my finger in paint, which is a common thing that I do. But I can always go back in after this is dried and darken my tail in. But I'm getting some nice texturing in here. I'm going to use my paper towel just to kind of stop a hard edge, because I don't want this to kind of bleed and then just leave this edge of paint right here. So I'm just kind of drying that up so that it won't travel as much. And we're just going to let this soak. Now, I have a little bit of yellow. I don't have very much yellow. I want some more. So while this is still wet, I'm going to grab my yellow and my brush. I'm just going to tap it in here a couple of places where it's really, really wet. Now, if I tap it up here where it's not wet, it's not going to do much. But if you have a puddle of water, you can kind of tap it that way, or you can do the tappa-tappa. Okay, I had to do a couple of things really quickly there. Sometimes when you're working with watercolor, you see something you need to do and you have to do it then. Can't stop because it's 3 seconds later and it'll be too late. But I wanted to add some green in there. I thought, have a little bit of green here. Let's pull a little bit of green down there. Kind of balances it off. Color theory, I'm not going to get into it today. But now I'm going to go ahead, this is relatively dry, and I'm going to go ahead and paint in that tail again. And I want this time for it to be really dark because I have a lot of stuff going on behind there. But I want this tail to kind of connect a little bit, so I'm going to clean my brush off. I'm going to wet where I want this paint to go, and then I'm going to let this travel up a little bit. Just kind of guide it just a little bit. Now it's pretty dark, so I'm just going to take and just tap off a little excess there. Just a little bit, just to kind of make it meld and blend together. I have a lot of fuzzies down here. I think I want some fuzzies up here. Even though this has dried already, it hasn't set for too long. So in theory, if I spray here, it should mist out like here. So let's see what it does. There we go. Not a lot of bleed. So I'm going to add just a little bit. I'm going to help it just a little bit. Actually, I'm going to do it with a different color because that's very purpley. So let's do that with some green. Let's just hit it with some green in here. See what it does. Some green in there. Maybe with a little bit of that red. The thing with traditional art as opposed to computer art is there's no edit undo. You just have to be brave and take the chance. And you may like the outcome, you may not, but you learn. So I really lost my crisp line, which I knew I was going to. It's kind of fuzzy, and I lost a lot of the detailing in here, but that is okay because I really got that blend that I wanted. I'm going to do a little bit of a smack paint, spackling up here. So I'm going to wait for this to dry, and then I can go back in and crisp that line up just like I did down here, and that'll fix the problem that I have. This is just about where I want it. I think I have a kind of a little bit too harsh of a line right there. You'll find with your paintings that I find a rest period is really good. You might think, it's done. Put it aside, come back with it even, 12, 24 hours later, and you might see some things you want to fix. So I never ever say like a piece is 100%, I know it's done. There are even pieces that I have framed and sell prints for that I'm like, I might go back and fix that. Case in point is my Clockwork Fox. If you've seen that picture, I've never been able to decide how I wanted to finish it. I have too many ideas. So it's an unfinished piece. Yet I have sold so many prints of that while I'm waiting to figure out what I want to do with it. Because I actually want to put a background with it, but I just haven't been able to commit to which one. So don't be afraid to put your paintings on hold for a little bit, and don't worry about coming back to paintings after a while and saying, you know, hey, I want to keep working on this a little bit. But I'm going to call this one good for now. A lot of techniques that went into play with this piece, but that you can either get a really simple, easy design with, or as you can see, you could just continue adding and adding and adding and adding and get just a crazy piece. If you try this exercise out for yourself, I would love to see what you create. Again, you don't have to use this shape. You could use any shape you wanted to, but make sure to tag me in your posts if you share it on social media. I have links to my Instagram and Facebook. And then if you want to download these images so that you can cut out these shapes for yourself, head over to my DeviantArt account and you'll find those there. Well, thank you guys for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. If you're brand new to my channel, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future videos. And if there's something in the art realm that you've always wanted to learn how to do, let me know in the comment section below. And who knows, I might choose your suggestion for our next video. So keep drawing, keep being creative, and as always, God bless you guys, and we'll see you in the next art video. Bye-bye.